So anyway, in the spectrum of time travel films, right? Like you have your Idaho transfers and your primers, and then your Edge of Tomorrows, right? One of which is really big and like not really about the time travel as much as it is about the action. And then you have the other end, which is very much about exploring time travel as a concept.
I said it before and I'll say it again. Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Never fear change. Life is too short for fear. Chase what is desired.
I can do this all day.
Would you mind identifying what you are?
We're the best friends squad.
That's what we call ourselves. Sort of like a team.
Welcome to the rodeo. Ladies and gentlemen, please sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride.
This is the way.
I have spoken.
Welcome to the Skiffy and Fanty Show Torture Cinema.
Esto Perpetua into fucked upness.
I feel like, honestly, that just feels like it's a magic spell. Doesn't it? Esto Perpetua!
Esto Perpetua!
Like an angry ferret comes out and chases you until you finally die.
Well, since I added into fucked upness after that, then yes, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Or, as this happens in this movie, you get stuffed into a trunk and used as fuel.
Honestly, that's not the worst way to go.
It's really not. Like, it could be worse.
They did get to avoid the whole, 2016 election, so. Oh, SJWs, woo! By the way, this episode is probably brought to you by Easy Cheese.
It is 100% brought to you by Easy Cheese.
Yeah, they don't know that they're sponsoring us, but they totally are.
They 100% are, because they are my favorite cheese.
Also, Easy Cheese needs to get their butts into a Lucan's, because I went to Lucan's and they didn't have Easy Cheese, and I am offended.
Offended. Luckily, there's 10 generic brands of Easy Cheese, so you really should just buy one of those.
But they didn't have any spray cheese of any kind anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
So they need to up their game in northern Minnesota. Come on, guys, hurry up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's fair. Who are you, Sean?
Well, I'm SJW Gay Voice Sean.
And I am Fatty McFatty Jen. Also, we've had a lot of pre-gaming on this show, so this should be quite amusing.
Wow, Jen, you just...
You're welcome. Actually, should I go with Fatty McFatty Jen, who turned her kids gay?
That you have to mention, given how much the people we're referencing are obsessed with gayness, that has to definitely be in there.
They're very obsessed, and I have concerns about them.
I don't, because I think they actually took the Idaho transfer from 1994 and are now here. And they don't realize that gay rights has actually progressed in the last 25 years.
Oh, that actually makes sense. Actually, no, that still doesn't make sense, but whatever.
It makes more sense than the reality, at least.
I suppose, although I have a lot of images of what their reality is, and yeah, none of them look that good for them. Whatever. It's going to be really fun to edit this because I am so drunk already.
Well, look, all you need to know is that the people we're talking about are like the saddest wanking boys in history.
They are so sad.
They need Jesus, honestly.
They need something, because the fact that they are as obsessed with earlobes as they are, I mean...
That's right, they're so obsessed with his fucking earlobes.
Earlobes are super hot, I'm not gonna lie. When I nibble on earlobes, I mean, it gets things going on.
Okay, Jen, whoa.
Exactly, TMI. And therefore, the fact that they are obsessed with earlobes like they are, I'm just saying.
Oh, do you think that they have, like a little fetish for earlobes?
I think they do. I mean, it's a good fetish. I'm not gonna lie.
No, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. That's just an appropriate term to describe what it is.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on here, is that there's a lot of repressed fetishes, and they really just need to embrace their other side.
Yeah.
Because they'd be much happier.
I mean, honestly, they would be much happier, if you just accept yourselves. It's okay.
It is okay. It's okay to live in your mom's basement.
I think what they really just need to admit is that they're just sad. Yeah, you're going to delete a lot of this.
We'll see.
But I think what's amusing about which parts Jen decided to keep from this conversation, that we are not taking our own advice, which is not listening to this. But I think mostly because Jen and I are finding this deeply amusing that we are on the worst podcast on the internet full of SJWs.
Oh, what was the quote, Sean? What was the quote? We got the best review in the history of reviews. The best. And that is the worst podcast store called "And They Ran Out of Us."
Like, woo! Best insult. Oh.
I am so madly in love with that insult. It's not even funny.
That may very well become our new note. It'll be a blurb.
All ran out of us at the worst podcast store. Also, by the way, these are a couple of my favorites. It's bad that I love the color blue. So sad. And the thing that actually did genuinely hurt my feelings, like deep down to my core.
Oh, God. Is
that they believe that I put my pictures up willy-nilly.
Fucking hell.
Willy-nilly, Sean.
How dare they?
How dare? Do you have any
dare?
idea how much time it took me to plan my pictures?
No, I don't, because we both know it was willy-nilly, Jen.
Approximately 15 minutes. And it's not willy-nilly. I actually did plan it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, now that we've had our fun, hello, trolls. Welcome to the Skippy and Fanty Show. We love you.
I'm going to make sure to laugh a lot because they don't like my laugh either.
No, I just want to note that given that my new superpower is apparently the gay voice, I am working really hard to gay you up.
Yeah, you're doing a good job of it.
So, if you listen to this and you become gay, magic powers.
I wasn't bisexual before meeting Sean, but I am now.
Yeah, because that's my superpower, gay voice.
Yeah, and it made me 50% gay.
Yep. I was part of the Weapon X program, and unfortunately I flunked out because I didn't come up with anything else other than the gay voice.
The gay voice, yeah.
Yeah.
And I only got the laugh.
Yeah.
The horrifying hyena laugh from hell.
Honestly, to be fair, we are definitely like bottom tier mutants as far as mutants go. Like we definitely didn't get the good powers. We're like Toad. Toad at one point joins the X-Men and he just becomes the janitor because the only thing he can do is like lick stuff really hard. That's about all he does.
No, he can cling to things.
Oh,
you know what?
That's right.
I
He
am
can cling
sick
and jump.
of the Toad hate.
He did become janitor. Like, come on, just.
I mean, yeah.
Anyway, the point is that Jen, I believe, was known as Jabberwocky previously when you were a member of the X-Men before they got rid of you. Yeah. I was known as Mr. Broadway.
Yes.
Yeah. So Neil Patrick Harris and I used to be a duo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he got better PR.
He has really good PR, though. I mean, they make those Halloween costumes for the whole family every year. You just cannot compete with that, Sean.
No, I really can't. And also, my gay voice didn't work on him.
No, it really didn't, which is why he's gay and married to a man.
Right. Yeah, so the thing about the gay voice superpower is you can't square gay with it. So you can't double the gayness.
Are you sure about that? Have you met Neil Patrick Harris?
No, look, he was that way when I met him.
Okay.
Which is to say he was perfect, so.
Yeah, he was perfect. He is perfect.
Is perfect, yeah.
So perfect.
Anyway, so moving on, we actually need to get to this actual podcast. Jen's going to have a fun time editing this.
I am, which means that I'm probably not going to actually edit it that much because I am too amused by this podcast already. So let's talk about what we're drinking, shall we?
Perfect. Well, I'll go first and then we'll jump over to you, Jen. So,
We don't even know what movie we're talking about, but it doesn't matter because we've had way too much fun so far to like correct ourselves. What are you drinking?
We'll get to it in a hot minute. So I will be drinking 2 beers tonight. I have the Summit Oktoberfest, which is decent. It's a decent beer. I like Oktoberfest beers because they get cutesy with the malts and stuff. Yep, and then I got on sale the Bemidji Brewing Red X. I just thought I would try it again because the last time I tried it, I was like, it's fine. It's not great. And I will just say that I have turned around. I actually think this may be my favorite of their popular beers.
Oh, well, congratulations.
So Red X is an alt beer. For those that do not know, it's an alt beer, which means that it is top fermented rather than bottom fermented, which most lagers are. So it's made similar to a lager, but the fermentation, the yeast goes to the top, and then they can basically scrape it out, and then I guess put it in other barrels, versus lagers, which I guess they can't do that with.
I'm gonna have to look that up when I'm sober, because I have no idea what you're talking about right now, and I've made beer, so that's impressive.
You've probably made more traditional lagers, which means the type of yeast that was used probably goes to the bottom. Top fermenting means the yeast gathers towards the top.
Huh.
And so you can collect it. They basically like scrape. It's not really scraping. They spoon it off, I guess. Yeah. I've never made it. I was just reading about alt beers and realizing that I rather like alt beers. It's a German style beer.
It's called an alt beer?
Yep.
Is that like the alt-right?
No. 100% not. The alt-right cannot fucking have this.
But it is alt.
But not with a hyphen. No
gotcha.
hyphen.
Alt beer.
Yeah. Alt beer. Yeah.
Because our German accents are fabulous. Okay,
Sorry.
my turn.
Go on. What are you drinking?
I am drinking Everclear once again because I always forget to buy, decent beer for my house because that requires going to like a separate grocery store and I'm just kind of lazy. But I still have an entire bottle of Everclear in the house. And so I made myself an interesting cocktail out of random ingredients in my refrigerator. Which I feel is appropriate to the movie that we are going to be discussing today. Because they're living on like shoestring and just whatever they bring with them. And that's basically what I did today.
I do find it amusing that what you chose to drink is the adult version of a suicide.
It's basically the adult version of a suicide. So it has grapefruit juice from a jar of grapefruit slices.
What the fuck?
So you can buy like a big jar of grapefruit slices, right?
Well, yeah.
Right? And they're delicious and I love them, but it comes with the juice and the juice is really, really fantastic. So do not skip on the juice if you buy those things.
Okay.
Plus some lemon juice.
All right, so we went for very citrusy.
Yes, I love citrus. Plus a squeeze of tropical flavored, like, water flavor. You know how you buy those, like, squeeze water flavorers these days?
Yeah, I got what you're saying. Yeah.
So I had the fruit punch version of that. And then some Everclear, approximately 2 shots worth. So that should be fun. Yeah, it's delicious. It really is a fantastic fruity, citrusy cocktail. I wish I had had some sort of, like, fizzy going on, but I'll take it. It's good.
Yeah, the fizzy would probably add a little bit there. I will just note for folks that may be listening who are maybe not from the U.S. or maybe are young and don't know what a suicide is, but when you go to any place that has a fountain drink dispenser, like a fast food restaurant, and then you take your cup and you fill it with a little bit of every single option there is, that is what we refer to as kids as a suicide. I don't know what the hip kids are calling it now, because I think calling it a suicide is a little...
It's a little bit...
It's not the term I would prefer to use, but that's what we did call it as kids. Now, I think we had the mistaken belief as children that by drinking them all together, it somehow created a toxic beverage that could, in fact, harm you. Really, it just made a soda that tasted really odd.
But quite delicious.
And yet kind of delicious, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So yes, that's what I'm drinking, and hopefully the actors/characters of Idaho Transfer appreciate that I had to get super drunk to even slightly understand this movie.
And speaking of that, we should probably say what it is we're watching, because people may be very confused. This is Torture Cinema, and I think so far we've not actually mentioned the movie we're watching. we
sure
had on
have it.
Patreon a poll, and folks selected, of the options, a film called Idaho Transfer from 1973. Now, some of you may not know what Idaho Transfer is. It is a very lesser-known film. It is a Peter Fonda film. You may know Peter Fonda as playing the devil in the Ghost Rider film.
Really? We're going with Peter Fonda, like,
As Ghost Rider.
Or
Or alternatively, he plays the leader of the biker gang in what's that? Wild Hogs.
Oh, right. We're not going to just go with the fact that he was an Easy Rider.
Look, I've never seen Easy Rider because I was born in 1983.
Fair enough. I haven't actually seen it either. However, Jeff Xylon has, and he apparently believes that it is not unlike this film, which would make sense.
Ah, interesting. Well, we may come back to that. So, Idaho Transfer is an unusual film. I think that I am taking the cue of attempting to explain what this film is about. It stars really nobody of note, although a young Keith Carradine is here as the character of Arthur. But for the most part, the main cast is largely unknowns. Most of the people that are in this film are only in it once. But it mostly follows the character of Karen, who is the sister of a character whose name I've forgotten.
No. You know what? You don't get to do this.
Shut up. You shut up.
You barely understood this movie.
I got what this movie is.
Okay.
Anyway.
Karen is the daughter
I
of
got
a gentleman.
I was getting there.
Were you? Because the fact that
Yes.
she's the sister of someone does not mean anything, really, in the grand context of something.
I'm getting to that. I'm getting to it.
Okay.
Holy shit,
Okay.
I just forgot the sister's name.
Okay, please continue.
Is it Isa?
I apologize.
It's Isa, right?
Isa.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, so the Idaho Transfer mostly follows the character by the name of Karen, who is the sister of Isa. Now, Isa is the character we first meet, who appears to be working in some sort of secret facility run by her father, which we later find out is essentially sending young people into the future, roughly 56 years into the future, because of a pending ecological catastrophe that is not really described, but is going to happen. And so they're going to the future, they're studying snakes and plants and things. And as the film progresses, Isa unfortunately passes as a result of a head injury and falling off of the actual transfer platform, the platform that sends them into the future. And eventually the government finds out that there's some wonkiness going on, and the young people essentially transfer permanently to the future and attempt to try to figure out if there's a way to eke out an existence. And that's the main plot. There are subplots involving Karen's traumatic experiences, one of them being that she witnesses the death of her sister, and some others that are off camera, including a sexual assault that she experiences, and a realization later on that she may have sacrificed unknowingly elements of her normal biology that she will not be able to get back. On top of which is the very bleak way that this story ultimately ends, which I'm sure we will come back to. And that gives you the basic idea.
You actually did a pretty good job of that. Well done.
Look, Jen, I'm a professional.
Are you, though?
Not really, no. Look, if I was a professional, I'd be getting paid and we would be way better
That's
at
true.
this.
That is 100% true.
Yeah. Join our Patreon, patreon.com/skiffyinfinity.
All right.
Anyway, so yeah, I think that gets the basic idea,
Yeah.
and there's lots of little fiddly bits, which I'm sure will come up in our likes and dislikes.
Yes, indeed. Perhaps. We'll see. So, since we spent 15 minutes just talking about trolls, who knows where this will lead?
Into the future?
Time keeps on tripping into the
Into
future.
the future. You know what? Whenever I hear that song, you know what I actually think?
What?
Space Jam. Because it's on that soundtrack, and that's how I know that song.
All right. We're doing likes or dislikes first, because this is an interesting film. So
We're gonna do likes first. Yeah, it's an interesting film. It is a film that I think we would both agree fails,
sort of,
but tries.
yeah,
It fails in some specific ways, and in surprising us, it succeeds, because we did not expect that ending.
No, we did not.
In fact, I recall in the Discord live chat with Jeff that we got to the ending and we all were like, I'm sorry, wait, what? What's going on? Like, is she, what happened? What's happened? Why is she in the trunk? What's going on? And we were like, wait, are they using her as fuel?
Yeah.
Is that what's happening?
It is a very interesting, surreal exploration of both human consumption and time travel and trauma. Actually, so not both, all of the above. There's a lot going on in this film. Like, a lot going on in this film. So that's gonna be my like for this evening, is I actually really enjoyed the more philosophical explorations that are happening in this, including the fact that they actually deal with a main character who has a lot of trauma. Karen is not your typical heroine.
16-year-old heroine.
Yeah, and I don't think you really can say that anybody in this is a hero or a heroine or anything anyway.
Yeah, those labels don't quite fit because
They don't.
the mission may be heroic in a way, but the way that they all
Sorta.
go through it, it doesn't give the impression that they are necessarily heroes, especially towards the end, which is going to be actually my like, so we'll get to it.
Yeah, so this is apparently done in the naturalistic style of filmmaking, which means that it's a very... the story flows in a very natural way, and by natural I mean like there's not really a lot of plot contrivances. Does that make sense to you? Because I'm trying to make sense, but I don't know if I am.
I think what you're getting at is I would approach it through the way that the performances and dialogue is set up.
Right.
Which is that it's not so much about the... Like, in a contemporary film that was telling the same story, there'd be lots of visual spectacle, there'd be lots of very deliberate plot points. So the example would be that we'd probably have more stuff leading up to Leslie, the character much later, who essentially goes mad and starts murdering people. We would see that as a much bigger component in the plot. But in this, the focus is much more on the individual characters and their interrelationships rather than on big plot pieces.
Right, and even though there are big plot pieces, obviously, the fact that these people are going, traveling back and forth into the future, which can be somewhat confusing as you go along, but that's like a big thing. The fact that there is an ecological disaster that they have to, that they're trying to jump past, young people are trying to jump past. Like, there are story elements, right, that we use as kind of guideposts in figuring out what's happening.
Yeah.
But the way the characters interact with those guideposts is not unlike me going to the grocery store and then realizing that I also have to go to Walgreens to pick up some prescriptions. And then maybe while I'm at Walgreens, oh, by the way, I need to buy some tampons. So I'm actually going to go into Walgreens as opposed to just using the drive-through.
I get what you're getting at. Yeah,
the decisions are very, and therefore, the actions are very...
They're subdued. The big plot points are, it's almost like what I say with magic realism, which is that the magic in magic realism is not the shining point of the story. It's very much withdrawn and pushed into the back so that it just becomes part of the existence. And this, it's precisely that, right? When the government shows up, we essentially get one big scene that implies that's what's going on, where they're all rushing to get the stuff, right? Get all of their supplies.
And even then, we're like, wait, what is happening right now? And you have to essentially infer what is happening almost after the fact. When it happens, when the actual act of them rushing occurs, it's almost a confusing step in the process because you're like, why, what is going on here? Right. They then have a very brief conversation about it, but it's not, nothing is made a big deal of. And that is no more apparent than when our main character, Karen, shares with her sister, right when we first meet her, that she was raped recently.
Yeah.
It's just dropped as a fact, as a thing that has happened. It's not dwelled on even slightly. However, that thing that happened to Karen informs almost all the rest of her actions throughout the film.
Yeah.
But when the announcement is made, it's literally dropped in your lap. Like, for modern audiences, it's a very unsettling, shocking experience because so little is made of a rape.
Yeah, one of the things I think is interesting is that almost all of this film is very muted because of that naturalistic approach. And this is a thing that the film's been criticized for by more modern audiences because it's not what we expect out of the way performances are done or how we expect film to be conducted. But what's interesting is that because so much of what we would consider to be the really, really terrifying bits, like there's an ecological crisis coming, that's kind of scary. Silent running tells us like the Earth's almost basically dead, at least in that. Like that is there, right? The government shows up, but that's super muted. There isn't there's not like gunfire. There's not like a military presence. They're just like some dudes in suits. Like there are some guns and there are some military guys, but it feels like, yeah, when they're trying to get her, when she comes back,
oh,
Karen
that's
comes
right.
back.
They have one gun that they're ostensibly are about to use to like unlock something. They literally, this film spends a solid minute on a character trying to find the correct key for a door.
Yeah, and so what I was getting at is that when you get to the end, the reveal of Leslie, right, we get some other reveals that again are muted, right? There are humans still living in the future, but they are not at the same, they're not on the same cognitive frequency as we are. I don't want to suggest that they use words like mental retardation and things like that in this because it's 1973. Yeah. I think it's hard for us to know exactly what's quote unquote going on with them, if it's just that this is their existence or if there's a de-evolution. I don't know. But all of that's happens, and then we get to Leslie, and the most in-your-face piece is, in fact, Leslie with the rock banging on the chamber for the transfer station because Karen's locked herself in it because she realizes that Leslie has murdered Arthur and Jennifer, yeah, right. And so you hear her bang, and we get it from different angles. We get it from the top, which has a much more muted sound because it's just hitting the top. We don't get the echo. And we get it inside the station when it's massive sound of that rock pounding on it.
Yeah. And Karen is understandably kind of freaking out about the fact that a woman who is trying to kill her is directly outside trying to get in to kill her.
Yeah.
And Karen is the character that has had a great deal of traumas throughout the film. I mean, like, the rape is just the beginning. And it's off screen. It's literally just dropped in your lap as a point that has occurred in her life. And a lot of the traumas kind of act in that way. They're off screen. We don't see them, or they're not explained until later. And so, like, you didn't like Karen because she is a very difficult character to like. Because she's making these decisions that you're like, why are you making this decision? This is a very bad decision. You're kind of whiny, to be honest, but not whiny. She pouts a lot. She's pretty pouty.
Yeah.
But when you go through the fact of what has happened to her and the major trauma of the fact that this movie is essentially taking place directly before a massive ecological disaster that kills off all humanity.
Or most of humanity.
And the wasteland that exists directly after that they have no escape from, really, is a space in which there still is no future for them. Like, this is it's a very bleak film. And
yeah,
I think that's really what I liked about it in the end, is that I really actually enjoyed that exploration of very real people, because I think that's, to me, what I got out of the whole idea of naturalistic filmmaking. These people seemed very genuinely real, like their reactions seemed very normal in the situations that they were placed in.
That's interesting. Okay.
I look forward to your disagreement, but I think that's what I enjoyed the most is the fact that I felt like I was actually finally seeing a post-apocalypse in which people were doing things that I would probably do myself. None of which made any sense, But what the fuck are you gonna do in a post-apocalypse? Let's be honest.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I need to
Okay.
get to my like, because
Yes.
if we're going to have a disagreement later, and that's going to get into fisticuffs, so. Yeah. Rawr.
I look forward to it.
So the thing that I think I liked most about this, I did have a lot of problems with this film, and I think the most of it was reasons you liked it or reasons that I just struggled with it. However, I will say that a thing that I really appreciated about this film really shines towards the end, because most of this film, as we've kind of been talking about, is this film does not hold your hand through everything. Idaho Transfer spends a lot of time giving details that you have to connect to something that happened prior. It's not saying A to B to C, see how everything connects. It says A, C, F, G, Q, B. And then you start going, wait, A to B. Oh my gosh. Q and Elemento P. Oh my gosh, they all link together. And this film does it all the time, and while we may come back to it in dislikes of why there are ways in which I think it doesn't work, in the end, it works the best, because what normally we expect when we watch a film, a film that's like about the apocalypse and like, has supposed to have some action sequences and like a murder and that kind of stuff, is we expect that at the end we get some kind of answer. It doesn't necessarily have to be the answer we want, but we get some kind of clear-cut answer, right? Either everybody dies, or the main character lives and succeeds and saves everybody, because that's what she's trying to do at the end, right? We're told at the very beginning that there is a panel that behind it is all of the equipment that essentially tunes the instruments that transport them to the future, and they're supposed to be very carefully maintained because it's very sensitive, and she just like cranks all of them because she's trying to save her friends from being murdered.
But she doesn't actually know how to use any of the equipment.
Right, so she just cranks them all. And what it ends up doing is it sends her further into the future, right? And it's this big moment. And then we get to the end, and she's walking, and she's realized what's happened. And we're like, oh, is this kind of it? She's just going to die on the side of this abandoned road? No. She gets picked up. And then she gets put in a trunk. And that's a weird place. Why would you keep a person in the trunk? Because he's so delicate with her, right? He's not, like, violent.
Yeah, we all thought that he was saving her.
Right, and then there's a conversation in the car, which is with presumably their daughter, and they're talking about like how they're going to use her, and that what happens when they run out, and we don't know quite what the they means, but we have to figure it out. What they mean by when the they run out, they mean time travelers, people from another time. And that what's happening is they are being used somehow as some kind of fuel, either to fuel the car, to fuel their society, maybe they're being eaten, something there. But we have to figure it out, because what it's not doing is it telling us explicitly, this is what you're supposed to learn. And I like that a lot, because what it does is it doesn't just give us a shocking ending that feels cheapened by just giving us all the answers. The shock comes as realization hits, and then we go, oh shit, that's what's going on. So the ending, I think, is where that method succeeds the most. It's
does,
a great ending. It's bleak as hell, and I also appreciate that. Thank you, 1970s, for actually having the guts to not give us clean, happy endings. It's bleak, but it gives us an ending that I think makes you want to think. And that's why I love when we do films like this, where even though I think ultimately this film fails, it flops just a little bit too hard in areas where it probably shouldn't have, but it tries to be something.
It does. It actually reminds me a lot of speculative fiction's short stories, in that short stories more than novels leave you in a space of questions and wanting to explore something more, because they hint at a greater world or a larger picture that you're not quite seeing, but you're very interested in, because the story has led you to that need to know more. The resolution is not technically a resolution, because you know that there is so much more happening that you haven't even glimpsed yet.
Yeah.
Or maybe you've glimpsed, but only tiny pieces of it, so you have no idea what's actually going on in the larger picture. Are these future people descended from the survivors of the original eco event, which when we first meet them are mentally regressed in some way, shape, or form? Or are they descendants of the group of young people that has gone into the future, and even though we're told that they are sterile, maybe they're not actually sterile? We don't know these answers, and that really makes you, in this case, want to have seen more of the picture. And I think it does an incredible job of kicking you off into speculation. So as a speculative fiction film, more than a lot of speculative fiction films, it definitely succeeds. It feels a lot like a Tales from the Crypt, or...
It does kind of feel like a long form sort of anthology episode for like an Outer Limits or something.
Yes, Outer Limits or Tales from the Crypt
or Twilight Zone, maybe.
Twilight Zone. Any one of those styles of anthology television shows that are essentially TV series that like specifically kick you into, okay, now we're gonna make you think. And that's how this ending felt. And it was good. Like, genuinely a good ending, despite the flaws of everything else. So
I think what's interesting is this is a film that has had a bit of a troubled history of how it came to be. It has not been well received in general. It's considered a pretty garbage film. But when I went looking for films that aren't good, this was one that was listed up there. But it was listed up there as sort of like a film most people have never seen, because most people don't even know what Idaho Transfer is.
No, I had never heard of it.
I kind of wish they had, because it's got a great title, darn it. But what's interesting is, so this film was originally released in 1973, which is the original intended release. The distributor, Cinemation, went bankrupt on its release, and in the very first week that the film was released in theaters, which means that the darn thing couldn't continue to be released because you couldn't pay to keep sending it out to be released and keep it out there. So eventually Peter Fonda had to get the rights back so he could do a release of his own. Now, what's even more interesting is it came out on home video in 1988. That version is the only version in which Peter Fonda gives an intro in which he explains his philosophy, as it were, about the environment, his remarks about the environment. I have no idea what he says in them, because I didn't have time to look, but I found this out. The version we saw is the version that you would see on DVD releases, which does not have the intro from Peter Fonda. I don't know why that's not there, but this film is so interesting because it shows up already basically dead in the water, because the distributor can't release it. Then when it finally comes out, it's confusing because what year did it come out? We can't, if we said the year that they went into the future, right, 56 years in the future, well, upon original release, it's like 2029 or whatever. But then when it really re-releases in the 80s, well, then the materials has to change. Now it's like 2040 something, because there's such a long gap. And so you have all of these problems for this poor film that never got quite the chance to breathe in the era it most deserved to breathe, which is the 1970s. Because the 1970s, we've talked about films both on torture and not torture from the 1970s. It is an era of film in which I would argue, along with the 60s, we get some of the most compelling experiments in science fiction and, to some degree, not a lot, but a little bit in fantasy film. And so for example, on Torch Cinema, we talked about Zardoz. Zardoz is a banana pants movie. Sean Connery runs around in an orange damn diaper for the whole fucking thing. It's bonkers. And yet, it has so many interesting ideas that I feel like we don't get to see in modern cinema today. You do in indie films, but not as much in what are the films being pushed. And I love the 70s for that so much. This film is one of those. It's doing something really interesting. And I just want people to appreciate it, even if they don't like it. And I think most people won't like this because it's a slow film. It very much broods.
It does.
And that's, even for something like Silent Running, which at least has a lot of visual spectacle, this doesn't. It's a film that it basically takes place in like a lava bed, presumably not actual Idaho. I don't know.
No, it actually is in Idaho.
It actually went to Idaho? Oh,
yeah.
Wow. I guess the Idaho film industry was really booming that year. So
it's the crater of the moon's lava fields in Idaho. So it's a pretty amazing location, to be honest.
They really only have like 3 locations for this.
Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
it's super cheap in the sense that they didn't spend a lot of money on elaborate set designs, on
Right. They didn't need to.
They didn't need to, and I think that's really important. But probably the most expensive thing in this whole damn thing was the car at the end, because presumably that's not a car from 1970. They had to like put a fake car frame on it to have a specially designed trunk for holding time travelers.
And I think you're right, because like if I look at another film from the 1970s that we did more recently, we have Damnation Alley. And even though like I actually bizarrely enjoy Damnation Alley, and it's a similar film in terms of the feel of it, except that it has a lot more action going on, and because of that seems honestly more contrived than Idaho Transfer. It's another example of a speculative fiction, and it's nowhere near as successful, in my opinion, as Idaho Transfer is.
I agree completely. This is like diametrically opposed in approach.
Yeah. Like, and I mean, I'll be honest, I've actually enjoyed both of the films. I love Damnation Alley just for the spectacle sort of Damnation Alley, in terms of like, this is an interesting, like, weird glimpse at a post-apocalyptic future from 1977. But Idaho Transfer is showing us a very different post-apocalyptic future, and I think it's ultimately more compelling.
I completely agree. I think sometimes less is more. And it's a lesson that I think Hollywood, unfortunately, totally ignored. They heard it, and then it went out the ear, and then they kicked it and buried it in a grave somewhere. Because I think a lot of times we've watched films where we're just like the example would be we watch Wrinkle in Time, and that's the scenes in that are the best are the character moments when characters are interacting, not when there's big CG spectacles. You know, and it's not to say that those weren't pretty. They are pretty, but we liked those pretty character moments. We wanted more of that. And this film is like all character moments, except for the one time when there's a snake, which is, I suppose, a character moment. I will say, also just to double down on the funny on this, thank you, Peter Fonda, for not harming snakes on the set. You have an unusual way of catching snakes, which is to use a noose on an animal that can squeeze itself thinner, but sure, okay. But they do actually not only have snakes on set, one of the actors interacts with a snake. A little bit questionable technique for holding, but I'll accept it. And the snake is released unharmed. They don't eat the snake, either the real snake or a fake snake. They don't harm the snake. They don't kill the snake. They're not afraid of the snake. They even correctly identify the fucking snake. It's gopher snake. Gopher snake. I don't know if gopher snakes are actually up in Idaho, but if so, even cooler. But I was so happy about that because snakes get a bad rap in film, right? There's Anaconda. It's literally a giant snake is evil. He's eating everybody. At least he kills John Voight, which is, appropriate. But a lot of times snakes are just the bad, right? They're dangerous. They're evil. We have a whole movie called Snakes on a Plane, and Sam M. Jackson just says motherfucking snakes like 800 times. This film, even though snakes aren't in it that much, the very first sequence is of a snake and people handling a snake and releasing it and not harming it. And so that for me gets automatically in my final grade a letter up. Automatic.
It was one of those moments, I have to admit, where I was like, uh-oh, Sean's gonna nope out of this in just a second. And then they release the snake and all goes back to like, aw. And Sean, I'm pretty sure, had this deep sigh of relief.
I did. I usually have a hard time handling even simulated animal harm in
hard.
film. It's not easy.
I will agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you love your snakes.
And I love snakes, and and it is the first scene. It's the first scene of the movie.
It could have gone very badly after that, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. And I think one of the ways that you can kind of look at this, that idea of showing too much and like less is more, is looking at the progression of Alien and the Alien franchise, right?
Yeah.
Where in the first film we see almost nothing, and then we see progressively more and more and more of the creature over time. And the fear quotient drops in, what's that word where you, in opposite? There's a word for it. Whatever. I'm drunk.
Well, I think what you're getting at is, the more that we see it, the less that we are afraid of it, because we can start to make sense of it, even if they're still, still a little bit scary. I think Alien has the problem of the very first film is super muted, and when the alien finally shows up, so much of the film is hiding the alien. We don't see the full alien. We see bits and pieces. We hear sounds, and then when we finally see it, it's a really big reveal, and it's scary, and it's a big deal. In the second Alien, the actual big reveal is an action set piece, because we've seen aliens before, and now we see even more of them. The best sequence of that for reveal is when the Queen is shown for the first time, and then when Ripley comes in the machine and fights the Queen, which is fucking great. Get away from her, you bitch. Oh, it's fucking great. Yeah.
It's very satisfying.
You have this problem of even you can't do Alien every time, because if you just do the same thing where we won't show it, people are just be like, but I know what it looks like.
Yeah, and like in terms of the Alien franchise, that's not actually a problem in my opinion, because I think that Ridley Scott has done multiple variations of the same film essentially. So the first film was like a super hardcore speculative fiction. The second movie is a military science fiction, and so on and so forth. Like, he's made different iterations, and so I'm okay with that. At the same time, it's not unlike this film that Alien, made in 1978, released in 1979. It was released in 79, I'm pretty sure it was made in 78.
Yeah, something like that.
Is much more like Idaho Transfer in that it's a very understated film, right?
Yeah.
Like, overall. And that's one of the reasons it is as terrifying as it is because of those understated moments. And Idaho Transfer is not a scary film. There's nothing scary about the film. It's more like a conversation. You know what it reminds me of? Is Three Californians. It reminds me of The Wild Shore, in that The Wild Shore is this very understated exploration of society and history and all of those different things, but in an incredibly muted, understated fashion.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at.
Idaho Transfer is a speculative fiction movie. As pure as one can make it. Not unlike Primer, if you look at it. Like, so there's styles of science fiction movies. You have the Primers of the world, and you have the Idaho Transfers of the world, and then you have things like that movie that Tom Cruise was in, which, granted, I love it, because it's a big-ass, science fiction adventure story.
Oh God, that's like a lot of Tom Cruise films.
No, the one that's specifically
Oblivion?
about time. No, the time travel one when she jumps back and forth, like he dies and then he goes back.
Live, Die, Repeat.
Yes, except that
it's called
we
something.
renamed it. Yeah, exactly. So we're Americans. We got to rename it.
The Edge of Tomorrow was the original name, and then they rebranded it as Live, Die, Repeat.
So anyway, in the spectrum of time travel films, right? Like you have your
primers,
Idaho Transfers, and your Primers, and then your Edge of Tomorrows, right? Yeah. One of which is really big and like not really about the time travel as much as it is about the action. And then you have the other end, which is very much about exploring time travel as a concept. And
right.
I would argue that Idaho Transfer is not exploring time travel, though. It's actually exploring other things. And in this case, I think we're very specifically talking about an exploration of human consumption and
human care towards others and
right.
the environment but through the interactions of a bunch of largely of teenagers,
exactly. So and that's really, I think, my point is that it's a really good speculative fiction film, and we still haven't gotten to our dislikes.
Nope, but I'm gonna get us there by way of a great segue bouncing off a point you were making.
Please.
Which is that I think it's interesting that you raised Alien here, because Alien is, I would say, for what we consider to be science fiction in the modern era, very understated, in the sense that its plot is very basic, right? They got an alien signal, an alien shows up, the alien killed one of their crewmates by popping out of his chest, right? Well, it first got on his face, and then it popped out of his chest, and then it's killing people and wandering around the ship, and they got to take care of it. That's the basic plot. It's a pretty simple plot.
You could actually simplify it even more than that, which is they show up in a space that they have never been before, and there is a foreign body in that space that infects them. It's basically like any other exploration drama. It's just that the infection or the virus or the bacteria that they encounter is not just one that they haven't encountered before, so they have no immunity towards. It's literally a giant creature.
I like how your alternate explanation was longer than mine.
I know, but I think you really have to look at Alien as more of a...
It's an infection narrative.
It's an infection narrative, right.
Although I would say there's a feminist reading of Alien, which is that it's not just an infectious narrative, it is an infectious narrative that impregnates men violently.
Yeah, there's a fear of...
Well, there is. Yeah, men do... Well, we won't get into it, but you get the idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but the point is, like, in plot, Alien is a bit understated. However, and this leads to my dislike, visually, Alien is not understated. It has tons of technology, a lot of great set design. Alien is a fucking gorgeous film to look at for what it is. It's low budget. It's not made for like, $100 million or whatever, but it's clear where they spent a lot of the budget, and the designs are beautiful, right? What we get to see. Idaho Transfer, though, I would argue, suffers from being a little too little. And that Alien is so great because it gives us just enough that we can believe, like, these people should be able to take care of this because they're technologically advanced as all of this stuff. Look at them. Look, they should be able to take care of it, and yet they can't. That makes the Alien more terrifying, right? It's using their own landscape against them. Right, they're supposed to know that shit better than that fucking alien, and yet that alien's hiding in the rafters and, like, fucking showing up for dinner and stealing the muffins, and they can't deal with it, right? In Idaho Transfer, we have the opposite, which is there's very little set design. There are some technology bits, but they're super understated. There's only a handful of sequences that take place inside the facility where the transportation occurs. And a lot of what we were talking about before, which is the big P plot elements, right? That there are cities that are in ruins. They found people living in groups of some kind. We never really see any of this stuff. For me, what that did is it made it so that I was paying way more attention to all those little character details in ways that I might not have if I had other things to look at that would have drawn my attention. Because what I started to see was, for me, was, you mentioned, like, Karen, for example, I found really difficult to sympathize with, despite what she's gone through, because we don't see really anything except her sister die. I couldn't really connect with the characters. A lot of the dialogue felt stilted at times, or I was having to figure out literally everything as I was going through after it had already happened. And I think a little bit of that, or at least half of the story, is that, I think, for me, would be the sweet spot, because then it's enough that I'm doing a little bit of mystery hunting, but I'm still being given enough that I get a sense of the world. And for this, I think it's too understated in what it's doing, and that pulls me back a little too much. I think it's an interesting film. I just think it does too little. It needs to be a little bit more. And I think that's unfortunate, because I think if they just had that, like, $500 extra $1,000 for just like a little bit of set, or to hire a couple of extra actors, or to find like a small town that, like, they would let you blow off the rooftops of their buildings or something, right? Just something to give us just a little bit more taste. Because even when they're like, we're going on this walk, we're going on a hike because we got to go find, I guess, how to survive, and they, like, the only things they really find is at one point they find a car. Great sequence, because that's when they realize that the people in that car turned to dust, and one of the people that was in that car was a baby, and that's a horrifying prospect. But that's like the only sense of what's the remainder of civilization. It's not enough for me. I think when you took the example of Damnation Alley is like, let's have giant bugs, why not? And it's just like too much.
Yes.
But this, it's too little.
Yes. I'm going to completely agree. I think that there has to be a middle point between those things, but I don't think it was necessarily in the production of the film. I think it was in the script of the film that ultimately failed, because there was a lot of jumping from like point to point where things are not explained, and though I get it for that naturalistic style, and I actually enjoyed it for the most part, it still leads to some very confusing, like, wait, what is happening right now? Why are they doing this?
And in moments when you maybe don't want that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. In moments when you shouldn't have to, like, be thinking too much about the very specific actions that they're taking.
Yeah.
You end up having to, like, kind of roll yourself back and be like, okay, I need to know what is happening right now because I'm not sure. Like, when we hit the Leslie point, I didn't even realize it was Leslie. I knew there was a third person, and in the context of the film, 2 people have been killed, but that we know or dimly remember that there's the third person.
Because she's, like, mentioned, like, twice.
Yeah, because she's mentioned twice, and you're supposed to assume, or the movie assumes, that you know exactly what's going on. When you're like, you literally mentioned this woman twice, and all of them look exactly the same.
And we do have one sequence with her where she is struggling.
Yes.
Yeah. She appears in some other scenes, but she's just like a one name character. She doesn't even get a last name.
And I think that's actually a big problem in this film, is that they don't establish a baseline enough to jump out from that point and explore. And so, like, when I was thinking about what is it that I don't like about this film, okay, so I was slightly uncomfortable with the eugenics conversation.
Ah, glad you brought that up.
Yeah, that will make you uncomfortable because this is a very 1970s understanding of mental illness, of disability.
We'll come back to it because I want to
all
read
of those
Jeff's
things.
comment. So why don't we come back to it while you finish your point, and then we'll actually come back to it.
We're going way over time, so
that's
but
fine.
We'll
Doesn't
come
matter.
to that. Okay.
Who cares?
So yes, those things made me uncomfortable. The fact that rape is dropped into your lap, that made me uncomfortable. However, at the same time, we saw those things, or at least one of those things, pushed back upon it, and I'll let Sean read the quote from Jeff in which he discusses that. So those ultimately weren't my problems. I have had problems with things like that in a lot of the other early 70s films that we watched, because no, I don't think they necessarily should have known better, but they still make me deeply uncomfortable, and I don't necessarily want to, like, recommend them to other people. This is one where I didn't feel that, where yes, it was uncomfortable, but I still felt they dealt with it in a fashion that was honestly pretty progressive for the time.
And it is worth noting that none of the male I mean, I think it's Dr. Lewis is kind of like he's being sweet on her by saying she looks beautiful, but he's not like trying to hit on her. And none of the other male characters really do.
Yeah, this is actually some of the best male characters I've seen in a 1970s film ever.
Yeah.
There is casual nudity, but again, it does not feel exploitative. So there's a lot of things that happen that they feel very 1970s in the sense of very relaxed point of view in terms of sexuality and everything else that existed in the 1970s, but not in a we're going to exploit women sense. Just in the, just like everything is natural sense. And the one thing that made me grossly uncomfortable, which is the eugenics, like, but mental disability and learning disabilities are not talked about in a very nice way, but they're also instantly rejected as a way to talk about things. Because Karen talks about them in a very dismissive fashion, and everybody else is like, that's not okay. And I love that.
And she tries to backpedal on it, and
she does.
It doesn't work.
She knows it doesn't work, but she knows she's being judged. She knows that she's done wrong. So I think
this is a like, Jen. This is not a dislike.
I know. I'm sorry. Ultimately, there really wasn't a lot that I disliked, except to piggyback on what you've said, which is it doesn't entirely succeed because it lets you dwell too much on aspects that are confusing, and you want to be able to just kind of relax into a storyline, whereas this film makes you work for even the smallest of details. And I don't mind working for details unless they're details that don't actually really add much to the story. Like the fact that Leslie is the person that ultimately goes insane. Excuse, the term insane, but she goes a bit mad because she doesn't want to be in the future because in her point of view, there's no hope in the future. There's also no hope in the past, but at least in the past, like I said in our Discord chat, you get to eat cheeseburgers.
Ah, cheeseburgers.
Right? Exactly. Because ultimately, both spaces, the past and the future, have no future. Sort of.
Sort of. Because they're 56 years in the future.
Right.
It is interesting that Leslie is like, oh, there's no future, here, but we have no future. And they don't, right? Because they can't reproduce. It's very difficult to live, or at least that's the implication in this future.
Right.
They've not found really any kind of civilization.
Right.
It looks like humanity's basically doomed. We know technically they're not really doomed. It's just a perpetual cycle, hence Esto Perpetua. But one of the things that I think is interesting is if you think about the past that they're coming from, that past still has some time left of relative comfort.
We have no idea how long, but
yeah,
there is some time.
There's probably a decade, maybe 16 minutes. I don't know. But you could eat a cheeseburger.
They never let us know. And that's fine, because I think that's actually an interesting thing to consider. Because you can either, in this space, you can either choose a finite future in which you get all the luxuries of the space that you exist within, in terms of modern day man and woman. Or you jump to a future in which it is essentially post-apocalyptic. The only things that you have to consume are like camp dry goods and some sort of vanilla shake that is high in nutrients. But there's no television, there's no cheeseburgers, as she mentioned.
Yeah, the comforts are gone.
There's no comforts of modern humanity.
Yeah.
But at least when you're in the past, you get those comforts. In the future, you get nothing. There's nothing. There's no hope. Everybody is dead except, theoretically, these people who are not mentally advanced like modern day humanity is. But there's no, good food. There's no television.
Yeah.
There's no music. There's none of these things. And yet these people, these characters, have chosen this future on the off chance that they can survive in some way.
It's interesting that you bring that up, and I want to use this as my segue into Jeff, because I was thinking immediately of a scene that I really didn't like because the acting was really bad, which is the scene with the hitchhikers. It's an interesting scene.
It was a weird scene, yeah.
But the way that it's presented, I think this is where that naturalistic style really falls flat, because the hitchhiker, I think, was just some random Idahoan, that they got off the potato farm somewhere. Or he looks like a hippie, and put him in, because he's going to something down in Denver, like some sort of Woodstock or whatever. And the way that he delivers the lines is just incredibly awkward and doesn't feel natural. It feels more like he's just learned those lines, and also he's very new at this.
You did not grow up with enough hippies. That's all I can say.
Okay, well, Jen grew up on a commune with communist hippies or whatever. My only experience with hippies was when I went to a Better Yourself for Teenagers camp that happened to be on a vegan commune. And I still, to this day, and I have said this before, my fondest memory is that we used to we get in a circle before breakfast and we'd sing a song, except the only song everybody knew was Puff the Magic Dragon. So we sang that every single day.
Dragon,
yeah, but see, the reason the teenagers knew it, Jen, was the adults knew exactly why the teenagers knew it.
The Magic Dragon. Puff, puff, give.
Yeah. Anyway, so, but the hippie scene, I think, is just, I understand what it's trying to do, which is it's trying to set up this contrast, which is these teenagers who are driving the car, they are part of a system where they're going to the future. They know basically anybody they meet in the past is going to die. They will be dead. They will not survive. Their ancestors probably won't either. And so there's a point when Isa, before she dies, basically says, like, I don't even think about them anymore. Like, I don't really think about them essentially as people. Like, they're just nothing now.
It's
that
dark.
sequence is great, but the sequence in the car is just like, it's super awkward and strange, and it doesn't go anywhere in that moment. It's just there just to set up so that Isa can say that later. And I like that Isa says it later because it's important. But this is where I think that naturalistic style kind of falls flat. Like, he seems higher than he actually is in that sequence. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's one of those moments where, as you said, this movie was not given the chance to really exist in the time that it was made. And that moment with the hippies is very early 70s.
Also, what is he doing in the fucking Idaho? Why is he there?
We don't know. He's hitchhiking across the country. Like,
from Idaho?
It literally doesn't matter because it's not important.
No, I'm sorry. No. Logically, this makes no sense. If you hitchhike from anywhere in the United States, you do not go through Idaho.
Well,
under no circumstances to get to Colorado. Absolutely not. Unless you're in Idaho. Unless you live in Idaho, and then you would obviously have to.
Okay, again, none of that is important to the greater context, which is essentially...
It is to me, because now I think he's an FBI agent.
These two young people are going to enjoy their lives. And Isa and Karen, Isa knows fundamentally that they aren't going to enjoy their lives much longer, and Karen is just learning that. So she has this moment of, like, jealousy over what they're getting to do, and Isa, like, essentially brings her back down and says, they don't exist, they're nothing, they're dead. And Karen that's one of Karen's traumas in coming to grips with the future that she's essentially getting forced to live in because her dad wants to save his baby girl. But again, the problem with this film is that all of those things that I just said are picked up in context that is never specified. So you have to guess at everything. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest problem with this whole idea of sort of naturalist storytelling, which on one hand is really effective in terms of it feels, I don't know, very lived in. But on the other hand, because you have such a limited frame of reference, at which is primarily Karen, you're missing so much.
Oh my god, I just realized. She's the first Karen. She started the Karens.
You're an idiot, and I'm not listening to you anymore. Can we get to our final thoughts and our grades?
No, because I got to read what Jeff said about the ending, and then we will get to our final thoughts and grade, because I tried to segue and it didn't work.
It didn't
so,
work.
Jeff came back, Jeff the Gracious, who is a member of our Patreon, patreon.com/GiffyandFanty, please join, came back because he had some thoughts about the ending of the film, because all of us were like, whoa, ending. And this is what Jeff had to say. In a certain way, I feel like it redeemed or at least reframed the gross conversation that people had about the deaf third-generation survivor, which is something we talked about just a moment ago, which is that they meet this survivor, and the people from the past all have sort of referred to them as being, like, mentally deficient in some way. It's unclear exactly why, except that they just like to throw rocks in water, which, like, I like to do, so whatever. And then, obviously, we talked about the eugenics conversation came up into that. Anyway, which for Jeff felt like a black mark against the movie. But with that ending, it did that thing where we say if your characters are going to have gross ideas, it's important for the story to point out they are wrong. I feel like the ending did that. These really smart young people, geniuses some of them, looked at and talked about this fellow human as lesser, as animal-like because they were technologically and scientifically superior. Then, in the end, one of them is seen by future scientifically advanced people as no better than a can of gas, a literal resource to be exploited. Sort of an explicit point that nothing kept these quote-unquote superior people from being downgraded to lesser beings themselves in others' eyes. So this was bubbling in his head, and I think it's a really great point, which is where
It is.
when we started, we got that esto perpetuo, right? Which means
Yep.
something like let it be perpetual, I think is the translation from Latin. And that's the ending, right? That is the thing we're supposed to take, which is humans continuing to exploit one another over and over and over for all time. It's bleak.
Yeah. It is bleak as fuck, folks.
Bleak AF! Put it on a t-shirt.
Which really surprised me. Well, because it's so unusual to get a film that is this bleak.
Films just aren't brave to do this that often.
No, they aren't. And
Indies
so that
do,
part,
but
that
not
was
big
super
films.
refreshing. Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Last thoughts, Jen. What are your last thoughts and your grade?
Ultimately, I was surprised at myself that despite the low production values and the very iffy acting quality overall, I enjoyed this film. And I think it was successful enough, especially with that ending, but also with like random conversations that happened throughout the film in what it was trying to do, that I think it really was successful, just mired down in some aspects that made it a little bit confusing to track, and it didn't look great. But at the same time, like, who gives a crap? It was a 1973 film. I don't expect it to look like Star Wars, I guess. I don't know. Like,
Star Wars was coming just a few years later.
Star Wars coming a few years later, and looks like there's a stark difference between what these two films are doing.
Yeah.
But they actually did a really good job with the technology that they had, and I did appreciate the scenery. So, like, it wasn't that the technology held it back, it's just that, like, standard sort of production value was not super high. But I don't think that detracted from the ultimate goal or effect of the film. So, I'm actually going to give it a B+.
Wow, that's a pretty high grade, Jen. Whoa.
It is. I did not find this torturous. I found it often confusing, but frankly, the fact that the main male character that interacts with Karen the most, Ronald, never takes advantage of her, despite the fact that he could have due to her trauma.
Well, and because she keeps saying things a lot that seem to suggest she's interested in him.
Right. That alone, oh my god, was fucking mind-blowing. How often does that happen in movies?
Not very often. Pretty much like 90% of the college comedies in which a character is traumatized and comes on to the male actor partakes.
Yep. And so, yeah, no, I have to give it a B+.
Well, that's impressive. All right, well, I'm not going to be quite as nice, Jen. I think
fine.
most of my opinions have been laid out. I just think I agree with Jen in a lot of respects, which is that it is too understated. There just needs to be a little bit more, and I think that you're asking the audience to do too much mystery solving by putting all the context together.
Yeah.
That said, I do appreciate that this film does not hold your hand from start to finish. While the acting is not always, I would say, great, I don't think there are any of what I would call Oscar-winning performances or even nominated-worth performances. I would even argue that in some cases there might be some of those, what do they call them? Razzie nominations worthy here. Possibly. Depends. 1973 probably wasn't a great year for acting. But I'm just going out on a limb on that. There's some bad performances. There is some great story and elements here. So for that reason, and also like they didn't harm any snakes, which immediately bonus points. I'm low bar, I know, but for that reason, I'm gonna actually give it a C because I actually would watch this again. Out of curiosity, I might even try to get other people to watch it with me. And I don't think I could give less than a C to any film that I would rewatch again. I would not rewatch it the same way I watch some really, really trashy action films, because this is a film you kind of have to pay attention. You can't just lollygag your way through it because you just will miss too much. But yeah, so that's what I'm giving it, which puts us at what, like a B-, I think is because you gave it a B plus, right?
Yeah, B minus.
So we put it at a B minus average. Not bad.
That's not bad at all. Well done.
This is like not the highest grade we've given to a film selected for torture cinema. That would have gone, I think, to Voyage of the Rock Aliens.
Well, we really did love Voyage of the Rock Aliens.
Yeah, we did. So, but the point is, this is partly why I wanted to do this, is sometimes you just get surprised. And I like being surprised, because everything about this film says it was terrible. It's a garbage film, don't watch it. Right, if you really want to have a terrible time, watch Idaho Transfer. And we didn't have a terrible time. We didn't love it. We didn't sit there and go, greatest film of all time. Why didn't Peter Fonda get an Oscar nom for director? No. But we did get a lot out of it. And also this conversation, like basically after we stopped talking about trolls, it got mad serious.
Mad serious, and I am so fucking drunk, y'all.
That's impressive.
Not even funny.
You're so messed up. Well, as always, if you want to support what we do, you can go to patreon.com/SkiffyandFanty. $3 and up means you get to join us for the live Discord watches, which we do one of the Fridays during the month, usually around the third Friday of the month, depending on the month. We announce those on our Patreon and on our Twitter. If you want to follow what we're doing, in case you're not a subscriber, go to skiffyandfanty.com. You can find all of our stuff there, including book reviews and also subscription links, or you can find us on iTunes and basically anywhere you can get podcasts. We have a newsletter at skiffyandfanty.com/newsletter. We have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/skiffyandfanty. We're on the Twitters at Skiffy and Fanty, and on Facebook at facebook.com/skiffyandfanty. And if you want to contact us directly, you can do that at email Jen at jenisterrible.net.
Or at LoopTLou on Twitter.
Yeah, or at LoopTLou on Twitter, or me at Sean Duke, or you can email us directly at skiffyandfanty@gmail.com.
Indeed. And I am drunk and I need to pee.
Oh, I mean, I can't really help you with that, and that's...
No, you can't. I just figured I'd take over the awkward ending.
No, fuck you. You can't take that from me.
Why can't I? I can be awkward too.
Look, I am gonna go cover myself in spray cheese.
Oh my god, I do love spray cheese, but I am never licking that off of you.
And oh god, I was just thinking there's a little grassy hill nearby, and if I spray enough on, I can use it to slip and slide down it. So I'm gonna do that. Instead of
fun with that.
Thinking about Jen licking spray cheese off of me.
Oh, you would love it. Just admit it.
Okay. And on that note, awkward ending and scene. Jesus, Jen.
Bye!
If you would like to support this podcast, you can do so at patreon.com/SkiffyandFanty. You can also find us on our website, skiffyandfanty.com, and on Twitter at skiffyandfanty. If you'd like to send us an email, you can do so at skiffyandfanty@gmail.com. The music for this episode comes from Sphere by Creo. You can find out more about their music at freemusicarchive.org.